Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's video number 2. I promise I will not do that for every single video, but yes, video number 2 and I'm back. So I'm sitting at a slightly different angle because Mr. Sun is right there. So I'm trying not to blind you all. But yeah, I wanted to do an interesting video today. As you can see from the title, it is called The Journey of a Story. Now, I didn't do this on purpose, but the day my video went live, I realized that it was also the day that one of my short stories was published. And I spent the whole day going around, promoting it on all my social media and my blog and Instagram and all of that. And I realized that this is kind of a perfect opportunity to show the journey of a story, how I first thought up the story and then how it actually became published. And it was kind of a journey, let me tell you. So I will link the story in the description box below. I will also, if I remember to, I will put it on the community tab so that it will always be there for anyone. If you come to this video later on, a few months from now, and you're like, oh, I can't find it in the description box, I'll also link it in the community tab. And without further ado, let's talk about The Fire. So The Fire was a story that I wrote in 2017. I believe I wrote it for an anthology that wanted dragons. And dragons are one of my favorite animals. I know it's not a real animal. I know it's mythological, but I've always had an affinity for them, And yes, I watch Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, but this is not about that. So this anthology wanted stories that specifically had a dragon in them. And I had an idea for a dragon that would come annually to this village. I also was kind of interested in phoenixes, and I had done a little research about what phoenixes usually represent, and it turns out that phoenixes are supposed to embody the idea of renewal and a rebirth, because phoenixes die and then they regenerate and they come back. And I liked that idea of a phoenix, which is kind of like a subset of a dragon. So I realized that my story was about a dragon, but it was also about a phoenix. And that's the story I kind of went with. I wrote it and submitted it to this anthology, and it did not get picked for the anthology. I was not really crushed because I felt like it was a good story, but I think there was a specific reason for that. And I think the reason was the anthology had been very strict about, we wanted under 1,000 words. So basically they wanted a flash fiction piece, and also it had to prominently have a dragon. And while my story does have a dragon and it does have a phoenix in it, it's just not the main subject of the story. It's a woman who is the main subject of the story. So they passed. And I decided that I didn't want to give up on the story, even though the anthology that I had written it for didn't want it. I said, no, this is still a good story. Let me share it with my critique group, which I did. And they loved it. They thought it was a great story. And a lot of them said, now that you're not writing for this anthology that's flash fiction, you can make it longer. And so add more dragon. I remember in my notes, it said, add more dragon. Everybody wanted more dragon in the story. But they kind of liked how I approached the dragon and the phoenix. So I didn't take out the human woman and just talk all about the dragon. I just fleshed out more of the characters. I added more detail, a little bit more interaction with the dragon, and the ending I kind of revamped to make it a lot more mythological. I think that's the best word for it. So anyway, I added about 500 more words and proceeded to submit this story for years. Years and years and years. Y'all, I submitted to anthologies that got canceled. I submitted it to places that no longer exist. I actually counted. I had 16 submissions. The 17th was the yes. And part of the reason that I think that it took so long was because from basically 2020 to about 2022, I was attempting to write a novel and I stopped submitting everywhere. I didn't submit anything else. So for a good 2 years, this story just sat on my hard drive. I never submitted it anywhere. I just focused completely on the novel. I was like, well, those stories are in the past. This is the new. I have to, focus on the new. Sometimes I'm like that. Sometimes I just get a new idea and I drop the old one and I was like, never mind. I don't really want to do this anymore. But in 2023, I had been working on getting back into submitting. And I went back to my old stories, and there were two. It was The Fire and another story called Siren Call, which was also published this year. Those two stories I felt were the strongest. And they were also the two stories that I didn't want to give up on. I had a few other stories that I kind of liked, kind of didn't. So I wasn't really interested in going back to them and rewriting them. Instead, I was like, no, these two stories are ready to go. Let me start submitting them. So I tentatively waded back into submissions in the fall of 2023. And around January or so of 2024, the rejections started to come back. And I still wasn't done. I still felt like, no, these stories are still good. And even though they're getting rejected, that means that, I'm trying. And I have gotten to the point in my career where rejections don't really bum me out. I feel like whatever's meant to be is whatever's meant to be. And you just have to keep trying until you get a yes. And so, as I've already stated, the stories were rejected multiple times, 16 for The Fire, and Siren Call was about 23, I think, something like that, 23. And Siren Call was even older. I had written that in 2014. So that story took almost 10 years to see the light of day. Let me tell you, that's a whole nother story. But that story got rejected from everywhere. And I actually wasn't really sure that it had legs. But when I, again, went back and looked at my hard drive and said, no, this story is still pretty good. So anyway, back to The Fire. I decided in January of 2024 that I was not ready to give up on The Fire. And so I decided that I was going to do a major push in March of 2024. There are 5 Saturdays in the month of March. And I decided that I was going to submit minimum 5 times every single Saturday. So they weren't always all the same story, but I wanted 5 submissions to go out basically every weekend. So some weekends it was 4 siren calls and 1 fire. Other weekends it was 3 fires and 2 siren calls, but 25 submissions went out in the month of March. And the fire got accepted on April 18th, 2024. And Androids and Dragons published it, and they were literally the first place I sent the story to. If I had just not said, no, I'm not going to do 25, I'm just going to submit to this one place that I see, I would have gotten in. So let that be a lesson that just when you're ready to give up, one more time, you could get a yes. So it was accepted, and it was published on October 21st, 2024. And again, I'll link it in the description box below. What did this teach me? Well, first off, it taught me not to give up. If you really believe in your story and you really believe that it deserves to be published, you should keep it out there as long as you can to get published. There are some stories that I have trunked. They're sitting, gathering dust because I no longer believe in them. But the stories that I do believe in, I have faith that one day they will find a home. And because I believe that, I keep trying. One thing that I have seen over the years is that every year somebody decides they're going to be a literary agent. And every year somebody decides they're going to start a literary magazine. And every year somebody decides they're going to start publishing. And just as there are people every year that say, I'm going to write a novel, I'm going to write a story, there are people that are out there who want to read your stuff. So don't give up on it. If you believe in your story, you need to keep it out there. You need to try. Did I get thousands of dollars for this short story? No. Did it add to my body of work? Absolutely. And eventually, maybe in like a year or so, I will self-publish it and put it up on my Amazon author section. But for now, it lives on the website Androids and Dragons for plenty of people who have never heard of me and never seen anything about me to enjoy. And that is really what I want. I want people to enjoy my stories. I want people to read my stories and maybe escape their crappy lives, or it will inspire them to write their own stories or go out and read more. I mean, we could always use more readers, right? So there's always an upside to getting published in most places, not everywhere, but most places. And as someone who's still in the infancy of her writing career, I am very proud to have another story published out in the world. It is hard sometimes to get as many rejections as you do. And there's been a couple times that I've gotten some rude rejections, but for the most part, most people are pretty nice. They're pretty professional, and I don't take it personally. I just don't take it personally anymore. I think the greatest thing you can do when you embark upon your publishing journey, not necessarily your writing journey, but your publishing journey, is to embrace the fact that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon, and you have to persevere. Resilience and perseverance are going to save your career. They really are. Because even if you get that novel published, even if you get that 6-figure deal, even if you get that movie deal, you still are going to have to keep working on the next project, I actually don't think that I will ever run out of ideas. And that means that there are always stories that I need to get to work on. But sometimes it is pretty nice to stop and smell the roses and appreciate that a story that I worked really hard on 7 years ago has finally seen the light of day and is out there in the world for people to enjoy. So Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week for a new story. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.